There are few technological companies as prosperous as Samsung. Unlike some of its American contemporaries like Apple and Dell, Samsung wasn't started in a dengue garage. Instead, Samsung was founded after Korea's worst warfare. And in this video, you'll learn how that carnage prepared the road for Samsung to become a worldwide powerhouse. To put it plainly, Korea did not have a good first half of the 20th century. After a century of political interference that turned Korea into a puppet state, Japan took over Korea in 1910. During the time that Japan was in charge, many Korean farmers and business owners were forced to leave their land and quit their jobs. As Japan's imperial aspirations in the area grew, the proportion of land that Japanese citizens owned in Korea rose from 8% in 1910 to over 50% in just 20 years. For a while, it seemed like the Korean people and their culture were going to disappear forever since the Japanese not only made them alter their names but also forbade Korean to be taught in schools. During World War II, the Japanese were beaten so badly that Korea got its independence back. In 1945, when the American and Soviet military governments were in chaos, the people of Korea were cautiously hopeful. Lee Byung-chul was an optimist like this, since he was one of the few Koreans who managed to establish a company before the Japanese invaded. In 1938, he started Samsung, a small shipping company that mostly moved food and other goods. From the beginning, Samsung had a big advantage over its competitors because it was strategically located in Masan, a city on the southeast coast that was the main port from which Japan took all the Korean resources it had taken. Lee wasn't a real collaborationist, but the dictatorship appreciated his contributions and gave him access to resources other Koreans didn't have, including loans from Japanese banks. Even though Samsung did rather well during its tenure in Japan, Lee saw a lot of potential in the newly independent South Korea. During the 3-year conflict, the majority of Korea's industrial facilities were damaged or completely destroyed. Almost 60% of the country's textile and chemical plants were lost. Once the war ended, Korea's economy was on its last legs and its infrastructure was in dire need of repair. Nevertheless, Korean businesses were too young to keep the economy afloat. South Korea's government printed more money to pay for the country's massive military budget, leading to a sharp increase in prices. The hyperinflation in Korea was so severe that by July 1953, there was 24 times as much currency in circulation as there had been 3 years before. The outlook for South Korea and by extension, Samsung was dimming, but the United States was there to protect them. The United States started that was essentially the Marshall Plan for Korea right after the war ended, and the United Nations quickly joined in. In the 1950s, the Korean government got $3 billion, which it used to invest in both large and medium-sized businesses. Samsung was one of the companies that got help from this humanitarian aid, which may have been because Lee knew the first president of South Korea. In fact, it is mind-boggling how much state aid Samsung obtained under his watch. During the war, for instance, Samsung became the world's largest exporter of scrap iron, despite the fact that the government normally imposes extremely strict controls on exports. What do you think of the video so far? Let us know in the comment section below. Hopefully, you're enjoying the content. If you want more videos like this one, remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's go back to the video. In 1953, Samsung began producing sugar and wheat, and the following year it began producing textiles, all with the help of US relief money. During the 1950s, Samsung grew at annualized rate of 93% because it bought abandoned buildings for US dollars and turned them into new factories. But helping people wasn't the only thing the Korean government did. It also gave Samsung a large credit line with very good terms. As a result, Lee was accepted back into favor with the Korean government, despite the fact that there had been two regime changes in the previous 15 years. Of course, the government also helped set up the most well-known part of Samsung. In 1969, the government passed laws that cut taxes by 50% for businesses that worked in the electronics industry. At the time, there was really one of these businesses, Samsung Electronics, which was also founded in the same year. In the 1970s, Samsung's mass-market TVs and washing machines became a symbol of Korea's modernization. It's not surprising then that the company has since moved into semiconductors and more recently smartphones. Samsung and the government have always worked well together, but none of this was possible until Lee cleverly put himself close to whichever political power was in style at that time. As luck would have it, Samsung is a public company, or at least its biggest subsidiary is. So you can easily profit from the long-standing connection Lee made between the two companies. That's it for our video today. So what do you think of the Samsung's disturbing backstory? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this content, remember to give this video a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe if you still need to. See you at the next one.